The princess's man 11, as Will and Alicia followed Jord toward his home, Will could not help but notice how the feel of the villages seemed to have shifted dramatically from indifference toward strangers to a carefully reserved caution. The feeling seemed to grow worse as they moved closer and closer to Jord's home. They really are putting people on edge, aren't they? Alicia asked, catching the looks on people's faces. Yes, they are, Jord replied, and honestly, they are calmer than I had anticipated. Once news that the Grenga were in town, I expected panic, but several people noted Will's arrival, which seemed to mellow out the response. Will, are you such a threat? Alicia said quietly. Alicia, don't forget how we met. Will said, I was fully intending and capable of killing your father and anyone who got in my way. Alicia thought about how ironic it was that a man as powerful and seemingly motivated as Will was would go from trying to kill her father to being her personal bodyguard and potential lover. She blushed at the thought and Will smiled at her as they walked. Well, here we are, Jord said as he gestured for Will and Alicia to enter his home. He followed, almost hesitantly. Inside were two beings who wore a strangely humanoid shape composed of dark shifting skin that seemed to encapsulate a mass of smoke. Both beings were sitting on ornate chairs that seemed to be composed of gold. But when they stood, the chairs melted back into the dirt they had been formed from. Greetings, Will said, attempting to perform an introduction for himself and Alicia, but he was cut off. Silence, bodyguard. One of the Grenga said. You will not speak in these proceedings. We await the Princess of Colt and the representative of the Gobran. We. The first Grenga trailed off as the second Grenga placed a restraining hand on the first's shoulder. Greetings, Princess of Colt. Greetings, Wilgaro. We are Likva and Mefter of the Grenga. More accurately, we are of the Jilnari Grenga. We welcome you and look forward to your visit to our city, and the potential allegiance you represent. The second Grenga said in a clearly more feminine voice. The first Grenga, Mefter, seemed to pale, realizing what he had done. Will spoke before Mefter could say anything. Greetings Likva, greetings Mefter, I am Wilgaro, grandson of Gotro and Ilan. This is Princess Alicia Ted Koltsheg, Princess of the Kingdom of Colt. We are here to represent our peoples in the coming meetings, and to determine if an alliance between our three peoples is possible. Will made a point to stare intrusively at each Grenga as he said their names, and Alicia was thankful for it as she was somewhat flustered. Thanks to Will, though, she was able to regain her composure and step in without a reintroduction, or some kind of offense given to the Grenga. Greetings Likva and Mefter. As Will said, I am Princess Alicia Ted Koltsheg of Colt. It is a pleasure to meet you. The pleasantries went on for some time, both parties asking how the other had fared on their way to this meeting place. Finally, Will seemed to grow bored of the games, and stood looking from Alicia to the two Grenga. Well, I don't know about the three of you, but I am ready to get this show on the road. Shall we? All three of them stared at Will and his strange colloquialism, before the assumed meaning seemed to make its way to them. Alicia nodded and the Grenga rose to follow them out. Jord, who had stepped outside to let them talk, saw them leaving and smiled at Will, who nodded and began to walk out of the village with Alicia, Likva, and Mefter trailing behind him. The trip was quick. By the time the sun had started to set, and the three moons began to rise, the strange group of four made it to the city gates. But the apparent friendliness that Will and Alicia had come to expect from Likva and Mefter was not given by the guards at the gate to the inner city. Only those who are supposed to be here are permitted entry. One of the guards said, We are supposed to be here. Alicia said, her voice carrying a note of annoyance at the disregard that Likva and Mefter were displaying at this confrontation. If you were supposed to be here, we would know. Please move along. The guard reached out as if to push Alicia on her way and found his wrist enclosed by the massive hand of Will. Do not touch the princess. he said, his tone dropping to the dangerous and icy frequency that Alicia had come to recognize as a warning Will would use toward those who are deserving. You will release me. The guard said, somewhat taken aback at the fact that he could not pull free from the hand holding his wrist. I will, but first, you will acknowledge what I said. Do not touch the princess. Will said, his eyes never leaving the guards. Alicia was panicking and did the only thing she could. Will, please release him. Alicia locked eyes with the guard and spoke again. I am Alicia Tyr Koltsheg, Princess of Colt, and Ambassador of His Royal Highness the King of Colt. This is Will Garrow, representative of the Gobran and Princess's man, son of the champion Brock Garrow. We are here at the request of your leaders, and this is how we are greeted. I will inform my father and the leaders of the Gobran collective that if the Grenga come forward with requests of trade or assistance, it is your fault we do not have an alliance. So please, tell me your name, guard. Will smiled internally, watching the blood drain from the face of the guard. And then Alicia and Will were shocked to hear laughter. A hooded Grenga stepped out from the shadows. Well met, princess. I am Halifax, leader of the Grenga, and I am sorry for my little test. I just wanted to see if the two of you were anything more than figureheads. And you passed easily, princess. The old man looked from Alicia to Will and locked eyes with Will. You, however, young man, I am unsure of. You grabbed a Grenga, and acted as if you could have stopped him had he chosen to harm the princess. Do you know why that is foolish? Will looked at the old man and smiled. Because even if he had gotten the help of the entire guard, it still would not have been a fair fight. The guards looked as if they were about to explode in anger. But the old man simply smiled and laughed. You are confident, and I can see from your size and how you carry yourself, you are assured in your abilities. So show me, young man, pretend these two guards were attacking the princess, show me how you would deal with it. The two angry guards smiled, thinking the old man was giving them the opportunity to get some level of redemption. They both hefted their spears and made as if to attack Will. But before they could finish the movement, Will grabbed their heads, each head in a massive hand. He was squeezing hard enough to make them cry out. He lifted the two Grenga guards off the ground, powerful muscles rippling under his shirt, as he turned to the old man with a disturbing lack of emotion on his face or in his voice and spoke, "Shall I continue, or are you satisfied?" Will squeezed a little more, eliciting more screams from the two guards. The old man looked at Will with a slight fear in his eyes, but he still smiled. I am satisfied. I apologize for aggravating you so. But it has been long since I met someone designated a princess's man, and wanted to know if the title was just for show. Will set the two guards down, and they scrambled away from Will. The old man shook his head. I guess I will have to compensate them somehow. Well, another problem for another time. Please, Princess Alicia, and Will Garrow, follow me. We would like to have a short meeting with you before we show you to your rooms for your stay. Will and Alicia nodded and followed Halifax. They were quickly introduced to a ruling collective and made small talk for a short while, before being shown to two richly appointed rooms. The rooms were a suite connected to each other. Alicia wanted to lay with Will while she slept. But, for the sake of appearances, Will insisted they both sleep in their own beds. The next day Will and Alicia spent a vast majority of the day speaking with Halifax and several others of the collective. They learned much, but the day ended with Will and Alicia understanding the Grenga were seeking the alliance for several reasons. But primary among them was the fact that a wizard of vast power had started enslaving the lower castes of Grenga and their leadership had done nothing to prevent it. This was also what brought them to this reality. Several days passed, with results that all parties found acceptable. The Gobran and Kingdom of Colt would both sign non-aggression agreements as well as mutual defense pacts. In return, the Grenga would assist with major construction projects and trade deals, Promissory documents were signed, and a month from the day, the leaders of the Gobran, Colt, and Grenga would meet to sign the official treaties. Will and Alicia went to bed, staying up for several hours talking of the things they had managed to work out with the Grenga. Just as they were about to drift off to sleep, a horn sounded. As the horn sounded, Will felt every instinct he had telling him to be ready. Then a voice that seemed to emanate from the very wall spoke. Traitors and betrayers of the true Grenga, rejoice! I am here on behalf of the great and powerful wizard Vilter. I am here to force you to realize your folly and give you an opportunity to relearn your place in this world. Do not resist. Resistance is death. The voice faded and Will looked to Alicia. Even the name of the wizard nearly drove Will into a frenzy. Then he looked at Alicia and remembered he had to protect her, and found the feelings he had for her overpowering his rage. So he took a deep breath and began dressing and strapping on the weaponry he always wore. Pack your things, Alicia. We need to leave. No. Alicia said, looking out the window. We just got done promising to help them. We can't simply leave them to rot in this instance. I am staying, Will, and as your friend, and as your charge, I have a request for the princess's man. Will was slightly surprised. The princess had never asked him anything so formally before. He was about to speak when a knock on the door stopped him. Will stepped to the side of the door as it started to open. Halifax walked in and Will relaxed. Will, Princess Alicia, I am glad you are well. Halifax seems to be understandably disheveled. I have a request. We can deal with almost anything they can throw at us. But not mages. Please call for aid. Alicia smiled, stepping forward to take Halifax's hand in hers in a reassuring way. Of course, we will help you. Alicia dropped Halifax's hands and turned to Will. Will smiled and bowed slightly. Your request, my princess? Alicia's face became the stone face of a royal issuing orders. It was chilling for Will to see it on the face of the woman he cared for. Will Garrow, I order you, as the princess's man, to hunt the mages of the force assaulting this city. In the meantime I will remand myself to the protection of the Grenga. Will bowed low. Yes, princess. Will turned to face Halifax. Please look after the princess. Yes, of course. Halifax seemed flustered. But Will, how do you intend to hunt them? Won't they kill you with their magic? How would you even find them? Without saying anything, Will removed his father's ring and watched Halifax's eyes widen in awe and a little fear as Will assumed his natural form. The ring no longer drawing off of his sealed magic to power his grandmother's enchantment. It's all rather simple, Halifax. Hunting mages is easy once you make yourself a target. Will turned and walked from the room. His hulking form seemed even more imposing now that his heritage was laid bare for all to see. Halifax looked after Will and then turned to Alicia, shaking his head as if to clear it. Shall we adjourn to the keep, princess? Yes. Alicia said, praying silently. Please, gods of the world, let him be safe. Let him come back to me. The princess's man, 12, Will felt the rage inherent to his Orcish heritage begin to well up. Any time he was walking into a fight, he felt it, and more often than not, he had to suppress it, but this time he knew it would be needed. While Will doubted there was much the mages could do to directly harm him, there was plenty they could do to harm everyone else, so Will decided to fall into the rage Orcish blood magic forced to blood rage, but Will had learned to do it naturally after sealing his magic. He fell into the trance of rage, his heartbeat pounding in his ears as if it was a drum of war calling to him. He strolled through the city. Grenga guards, civilians, and others took one look at the massive slab of meat coated in runes with eyes that pierced the heavens. Bathed in the typical red flush of Orcish blood rage, and got out of his way, The first enemy Will encountered was a wood elf magi with a long flowing staff. Upon seeing Will, the wood elf cursed him in Elvish for being a half-blood bastard and threw a fireball at Will. Will smiled unmoved, seeming to disappear and reappear right behind the magi. Will clapped, his arms swinging with enough speed that a faint whistle could be heard from his fingernails. The elf died with a half-crushed head. Will washed through the city like a cleansing fire, slaying magi, man, and monsters alike. When he reached the city gates, the city was oddly quiet. He stepped out and immediately felt a web of magic fall over him. He felt it slip from his body, but he guessed it was a web of paralysis, so he froze, letting whoever had cast it think it was successful. My, what do we have here? A voice said from above Will, I do not know, brother. A second voice said as Will watched 3 robe hems descend from the sky, he looks like an orc. The third said, wait a moment. Look at his face. Look beyond the runes, beyond the blood rage. The second said, he is the son of the Otherworlder. The first said, well, what a lucky day. The third said, and the 3 of them circled in the air, slowly. We must take him to the master. Yes, Master Vilter will be quite pleased with this one. The second said and floated down to look Will in the face. You will be a good little slave, aren't you? The next moment was one of fear for the second. Faster than he could react, Will grabbed his throat and crushed it. At this point, the other 2 realized he was not detained as they thought. Quickly they began to float up and away, but not quick enough. Seemingly from nowhere, Will pulled 2 knives and sent them flying with extreme force. The first knife pierced the neck of the third brother, and the second knife caught the first brother in the eye. Letting out howls of pain, both brothers dropped to the ground. The knife in the throat of the third brother caused his breathing to come raggedly before ceasing a few moments later. With a knife still protruding from his eye, the first brother rose to his knees from where he had fallen, only to feel Will's massive hand close around his head. He began to whimper as Will lifted him to his feet. You know healing magic, I assume? Will asked through gritted teeth in a voice that was little more than a growl. The first brother nodded. Good, now heal it before I decide to send you on your way after your brothers. Quickly the first brother cast a healing spell that ejected the knife and restored basic health to his eye. Will spoke again. Now, you will deliver a message. You will return to your master Vilter and tell him I am coming. Tell him he will pay for the traitorous acts he committed against my father. Tell him the only salvation he will have is death. Will stared at the brother until he was merely a dot in the sky. Will then spent another hour sweeping the city once more, killing any remaining enemy troops. In total, Will had been fighting for more than 5 hours. When he finished and slowly made his way back to where he had last seen Alicia, he let the rage drain from him and felt his body begin to slow down. He stumbled through the last door into the rooms he had shared with the princess, finding her there with Halifax and 2 other Granga. Will stumbled over to the bed he had slept in the night before, noting a scrying dish between the 4 of them. Will knew what was coming and knew he only had a moment or 2. He sat on the bed, exhaustion seeming to radiate from his body. Your orders are carried out, princess. Will said, thank you, Will. She cut off as Will continued to speak, I am about to pass out. Forgive me, princess, but I must trust your safety to Halifax until I wake. Will said, using sheer willpower to ensure he heard her answer, of course, Will, you did an immense job just now. Sleep, please. Alicia said with a smile to him, just as Will's eyes closed and his head hit his pillow. Will heard Halifax speak. Rest well, Will. When you wake, Alicia will be safe. I swear it. Alicia watched as Will, normally a bastion of strength and power, collapsed into what could only be described as sheer exhaustion. She smiled at the giant man and gently slipped the ring onto his finger. As she watched, the illusion cast on the ring began to once more feed on Will's sealed magic and washed over him, changing him back into the man she knew and cared for. When Will came to, his head was resting on something soft. He opened his eyes and found Alicia's head over his. "Good morning, Will," she said with a smile. Will smiled at her and had to admit this was a good way to wake up. "How long was I out, Alicia?" he asked, sitting up and taking a drink from a glass of water that awaited him. "A little over 9 hours. But I think it was rest well earned," Alicia said. "They worked for the traitor." Will said with venom in his voice. "I know," Alicia said quietly. "I watched you with scrying. That's how we knew to meet you here rather than to stay in the keep." "I'm sorry, Will." Will looked up at Alicia. She seemed unsure, as if she didn't know how to deal with what was going through her mind. So he did the only thing he could think of. He sat up and pulled her under his arm, encasing her in a cocoon of muscle and warmth. Then he spoke. "I know you don't fully understand my rage. I know you do understand being angry at losing my father, but not the rest of it. And I think you want me to stop pursuing Vilter. Don't you?" Will asked and chuckled at the meek nod he felt from the princess. "And that is fine. You can wish for those things and tell me to calm down, but I need you to know I will hunt Vilter for all my days if that is what it takes. If you can't understand that, it's okay. I just ask you to be supportive if you want to be." Will said, stumbling through the last part, finding his own awkwardness. "Thank you." Alicia said. "I didn't know how to phrase it, but I think you understand." "Anytime," Will said, standing up and stretching before turning back to Alicia. "So, are you ready to head out? If we leave now, we can get back to the village tonight and then take our time getting back to the Gobran." "I am," she said, standing and straightening her skirts. "I am ready to be home." "Very well, princess," Will said with a smile. In total, it took them twice as long to get back to the Gobran as it had taken them to get to the Granga city. The pace they set back was much more leisurely. When they returned, they relayed what had happened to Ilan and Gotro. Gotro laughed. "Already, they call on us for aid. How weak are these people?" he exclaimed. "Dear," Ilan said sternly, "what did we discuss about referring to current or future allies as weak?" "Sorry, my love," Gotro said with a smile and a wink at Alicia and Will. "I will send a battalion of orcs and any of our magi that would like to go just in case Vilter strikes again." "Yes, a good call," Ilan said thoughtfully, then focused on Will and Alicia. "Will, Alicia, you will remain here at least for the next few weeks. We can send your knight back with the news and an escort. Will, you will be given training by the Shadow Guard for your duties as the princess's man." Alicia looked at Will, wondering what he could possibly have to learn still. Ilan caught the look, smiled at Alicia, then spoke a single word in Elvish. Alicia was shocked as 7 beings of various races seemed to pull themselves into reality from the walls. Alicia was shocked, and Ilan could see that. Will is a warrior. He is a blunt weapon who uses raw power and sheer overwhelming force to achieve what he wants. These men and women are weapons of focus. They have only one purpose: to protect us. The training they receive is different than the training Will has already received, and he will not need most of it, so it should only take a month or 2. Alicia nodded and noticed Sir Balefur being let in. Alicia smiled at him as he bowed. "I am glad to see you back in one piece, princess." "As am I," Alicia said. "How does your training?" "I realize now how little I knew of combat and would relish the opportunity to come back and train here again," Sir Balefur said with a smile. "When do we depart to report to the king?" "You leave as soon as you are ready," and I have been informed you will have an escort. Will is going to receive some specialized training, and I will be here," Alicia said, giving him a quick rundown of the events that took place in the Granga city. "So I wish you luck, Sir Balfour, and please let my father and mother know I am perfectly fine." Sir Balfour knew the tone she had used signaled no argument would be permitted, so he bowed once more and nodded, clapping Will on the shoulder as he left. Alicia turned back to Ilan. "So what do you have for me to do? I assume you have something in mind?" Alicia asked. "Of course, my dear," Ilan said with a smile, taking Alicia's arm and walking to where an orc woman and an elf woman stood waiting. "Alicia, meet Yavnara and Elithana. Yavnara is one of the Ogdashi here, and Elithana is a mage I have personally trained. As per our earlier discussion, you will be learning magic, as much as Elithana can teach you, and Yavnara will teach you how to fight in concert with Will so that if a dangerous situation arises, you are not simply dead weight to slow him down." Ilan looked back and was relieved to find an excited look on Alicia's face. "I must warn you, Alicia, the next few months will probably be the hardest thing you have ever done. You will end every day tired and sore. Will you accept this, and do you agree not to seek punishment against these two women for striking royalty?" "Yes, of course," Alicia said, excited, mostly at the fact that she would no longer be a dead weight to Will. "Good," Ilan said and turned to leave. "Very well, princess," Yavnara said with a smile, "let us begin." Yavnara wound up, and quicker than Alicia could react, she knocked the princess unconscious. The princess's man 13, it was day 7 of her training, and Alicia now wondered how people like Will and Sir Balfour put up with it week after week. The initial welcome she had gotten with Yavnara had knocked her unconscious, and had been Alicia's first real sense of physical pain other than accidents suffered as a child. It had been a living hell thus far, and Alicia questioned if she could keep it up. Every day she rose before the sun, and went through weapons training with Yavnara. Essentially, she was learning how to keep people away from Will's back as he did a demon's load of work. She ended her training with an hour-long soak in the communal baths, then usually ate lunch with Will, who was often more bruise and bandage than flesh and bone. After lunch, Alicia would train with Elithana to use highly efficient magic. So far she had learned several simple defensive spells that were deceptively powerful and used hardly any magical power. This was perfect for Alicia and her meager magical abilities. She thought after the first day or two, she would grow to hate the brutish Orcish woman who was currently the bane of her existence. Alicia was surprised when she found herself enjoying the grueling tasks Yavnara set out for her. She also began to notice just how many female eyes lingered on Will when he walked by. This only seemed to drive her to work harder. Will had just walked past, chatting with 2 of the shadow guards. Alicia watched him with hungry eyes, as did every other woman in the training ground. One, in particular, saw how Alicia looked at Will and snarled at her. When Will was out of earshot, the woman spoke. "The soft princess has eyes for Will." The voice called out to the crowd of mostly women who remained at the training grounds, "She thinks herself capable of handling him as a woman should handle a man." Alicia looked at the woman who was speaking and recognized Agrana, Will's original Ogdashi. At Agrana's words, Alicia smiled at the Orcish woman and quietly gestured for both of her teachers who had begun to turn towards Agrana. To relax, Alicia spoke. "You know, I think you may be right, Agrana, I do have eyes for Will. But what of you? What do you have for him? While I may have eyes, and may not handle him as you think I should, I have many things to provide to him, especially as Princess of Colt." Alicia never took her eyes from Agrana. "So tell me, Ogdashi Agrana, what can you possibly provide him that I cannot?" The entire training ground waited in silence, and Alicia felt her blood pounding through her body. Agrana's mouth worked for a second and then she lunged for Alicia, only to be brought up short by an invisible force. Yavnara, and I may be exempt from punishment for harming the princess, Elithana said, her hands held up and slightly glowing, but I would remind you to remember your place, Agrana. Alicia is the first princess of Colt and therefore protected under the laws of the Gobran. If you ever move to strike the princess again. Yavnara began to speak and Agrana laughed. You both think you could stop me if I actually wanted to kill this annoying human? Agrana asked, and then the reddish flare of blood magic played across Agrana's face, and she was moving freely again. Agrana looked at Alicia. Just because you play at learning our ways, do not think to step above your abilities. As to what I could provide him, the answer is simple, I could provide him with strong children. Agrana smirked and left the training grounds, taking several other orc women with her. Alicia smiled despite how she felt and finished her training for the day. After eating, she sat in a secluded corner of the public bath, silently wiping the tears she had held back from her eyes earlier in the day. You know you do not need to cry. An elderly voice said, and Alicia jumped and turned expecting to see Elan having snuck up on her once again, but instead she found herself faced with an ancient-looking Drati woman. Oh, I am sorry. Alicia said, moving to get out of the woman's way, I didn't mean to. The woman simply smiled and placed a hand on Alicia's shoulder. You have done nothing wrong, princess. As a matter of fact, you have displayed nothing but courage since arriving here. It is Agrana who is cowardly. Alicia stared at the woman she had never met before and smiled in thanks. I know. I am doing everything I can, I just. Alicia said, and paused. What if Agrana is right? What if I cannot give Will strong children? The old woman laughed. Now I do not know you well, princess, but I would like to think I know young Will quite well. So let me ask you a couple of things. Alicia nodded, wondering once again who this woman was, and then she spoke again. Have you asked Will what he wants as far as children? Have you been with him? Do you even know why Will turned away from Agrana? The questions were good ones, Alicia had to admit, and they were embarrassing, but she answered anyway. No, I have not asked him, and I have not been with him, at least not all the way. I also have no idea what happened between him and Agrana. The old woman laughed, laying back so she floated chest up in the water. Then it sounds to me like you don't know a lot of what you should. Will may appear human in many ways, but he was raised by orcs, elves, and Drati. We are not shy about these things, but we also do not volunteer information unless it has been asked for. So before you go staining your pretty face with tears, why don't you ask that big lummox some of these questions? Alicia smiled and soaked for several more minutes, idly chatting with the woman. Alicia rose to go and stopped just before pulling herself free from the embrace of the warm water. May I know your name? You helped me and I appreciate it. The old woman cracked open a single eye, looking at Alicia appraisingly. I am Carva. I wish you luck, princess. The next day was the end of the week for the Gobran. Alicia was excited. The following day was a holiday for the Orcish people, so no training would be conducted. She and Will would finally have a day with each other. On the morning of the holiday, Alicia woke early and moved to enter Will's room. When she opened the door, she found Will fast asleep. She lay down on his bed, next to him, snuggling up to him. Alicia felt his massive hand move to rest on her hip and felt his lips press against her neck. Good morning, Alicia. Will said, pulling her close and snuggling down into his bed. Good morning, Will. Alicia said, reveling in the feeling of him being close and pressing herself against him. I have some questions for you, Will. Oh really? Will said, and surprised her then by lifting her as if she weighed nothing. He rolled, bringing her over himself so that she lay with her back to the wall. In front of her was the wall of muscle that was Will's body. She found herself face to face with him. She wanted nothing more than to kiss him. But she wanted to get her answers first. So then ask me, Alicia. What happened between you and Agrana? Alicia said and felt his body tense. She was my Ogdashi, Will said. As you know, orcs and elves are not as, shall we say, reserved with sexuality as most other peoples. As an Ogdashi, she felt distractions were not acceptable, and I was distracted by a lot, especially when I was younger. Any hint of cleavage or a curve of flesh I had not felt or seen before, and I was distracted. So once I came of age, Agrana grew bored of the games her other students played with me, trying to tease me with less and less clothing. Agrana's solution was to show me everything, let me feel everything, and to let me exert my sexual energies with her, to my satisfaction. For several months, my every waking moment was spent with her. When we were not training, we were in her home. The way Will said in her home left nothing to the imagination as to what they had been doing. Alicia said nothing, waiting for Will to continue, so he did. She thought this meant she was my prospective mate, and in all honesty, I did not know she had approached my grandmother and grandfather about getting in contact with my father to try and arrange the match. Then my father died and I received the letter. Will's tone had grown cold for a moment, and he seemed to shudder and smile at Alicia simultaneously. As you know, I had plans to kill the royal family of Colt. When I told Agrana, she laughed and said my father dying was for the best, as now there would be no need to worry about any strange human rituals or requirements for our joining. She told me she would make me forget all about my anger, even if it took her a whole week spent on her back. Will smiled at the aghast look on Alicia's face. I mean, to be fair, fighting and fucking were the only ways we had ever interacted with each other, and I think Agrana cherished that. But hearing her say my father being gone was good, and implying that sex would solve the pain I felt, nearly drove me into a rage. I left less than an hour later. Then the next time she saw me, I had you in tow with me. Will looked somewhat sad. I think maybe Agrana has not quite accepted we are no longer an item. Alicia smiled. I don't think so either. She said some hurtful things to me yesterday, but I guess knowing what happened, if I were in her place I might do the same. Will frowned. What did she say, Alicia? Alicia smiled and shook her head. Don't worry about it. I will deal with it. Alicia leaned in and kissed him playfully. Now for the remainder of the morning, you are to do that thing to me. Will smiled at her commanding tone, as she pulled his hand down from where he had rested it on her shoulder, to cup one of her thighs. Of course, princess. Alicia moaned slightly, deciding that the feeling of Will's fingers teasing her body was far more important than any other question she might ask at that moment. The princess's man 14, Alicia was in ecstasy. She felt her eyes roll back into her head as she focused on the feeling of Will's fingers caressing her nipples while his tongue played between her legs. Her fingers tangled involuntarily in his hair, pulling his face flat against her. In response, Will gripped her nipples and twisted lightly. Oh, Will. I. Alicia gasped the words out and cut off as she felt her body convulse as waves of pleasure coursed through her. She nearly screamed when Will did not relent. One of his muscle-bound arms snaked around her waist to prevent her from pulling away, and his tongue continued working its magic with even more energy than before. Several minutes later, Alicia was panting and Will lay next to her. He smiled and grabbed the nape of her neck gently to pull her close to kiss her passionately before speaking. I have to admit, princess, I am surprised you asked for that. I thought for sure you wanted me to tease you like I did last time. I want to please you, Alicia said, and then smirked at the surprised look on Will's face when he felt her hand encircle his throbbing manhood. You pleased me, now let me please you. Will lay back, watching the top of Alicia's head as she trailed kisses down his chest, finally planting an oh-so-gentle kiss at the crown of his cock. Surprising him once more, she opened her lips and let her tongue slide down the bottom of his manhood as she took as much of him into her mouth as she could. Will could tell she had not done this before and offered gentle suggestions and guidance that Alicia seemed almost eager for. Before long, Will was panting as Alicia worked him closer and closer to the edge. "Oh fuck Alicia, I am going to come." Will panted out and was shocked into orgasm when Alicia grabbed the base of his cock and forced herself as far down on his pulsating manhood as she could stand. Alicia held herself there as she felt Will throb inside her, his hot seed spilling down her throat. She liked the feeling and could feel Will holding himself back from thrusting up into her mouth. She wanted to pull off and take a breath, but she felt her job was not complete. She held tight, pulling him deeper still into her mouth. When his cock stopped pulsating in her mouth, she pulled off and took a breath. "I want that in me next time," she said to herself. She looked up and locked eyes with Will. The look there told Alicia that if she said nothing, the next time would be in about 20 seconds. To encourage him, she reached down to his sensitive cock and began stroking slowly. "Where the hell did you learn that?" Will said, his body quivering in anticipation as Ilika felt his cock growing hard once more in her grasp. Will returned the favor by reaching between her legs to fondle her clit as they both took a moment of lesser pleasure to recuperate. "After my little run-in with Agrana, Yavnara and Elithana could see I was upset, so they asked me how far we had gotten and I told them," Alicia said, taking a breath and moaning as she began to rock her hips in time with Will's fingers dipping inside her. "When I told them what I had planned for next time, they suggested some dot pointers." Alicia said this last word with a sense of mischief and Will laughed, his hips bucking upward of their own volition as she stroked. He took a breath and spoke. "Well, Alicia, what now? Seems we'd both want more. Do you want more of my mouth, or?" The way he trailed off left little to the imagination, and Alicia was about to beg him to take her when the door opened. One of the Drayty handmaids who had been helping Alicia walked in, saw what was happening, and took on a stunning shade of red before apologizing profusely and walking out the door. "Well," Alicia said, embarrassed, "as much as I want to continue this, I think now we need to go eat and I need to apologize to my handmaid." "I suppose so," Will said, giving her clit one last caress, causing a shiver to ripple through her body before he pulled his hand from between her legs. She released his manhood and leaned down to kiss him before they both rose and dressed. Alicia spoke to her handmaid and ladies-in-waiting about making sure to knock. Alicia made her way to the hall where she, Will, and his grandparents ate breakfast. Elon smiled at Alicia, who smiled back as she took a seat next to Will. They ate a full breakfast, chatting with each other. As they enjoyed a hot cup of tea while Drayty cleared the plates, a commotion in the entry hall gained the attention of Elon, who went to investigate. When Elon opened the door, words being yelled were finally made clear. "Where is the whore?" Agrana's voice yelled. "That little slut thinks she can." Agrana's voice trailed off as Elon's quiet voice spoke. "I am sure I do not know who you are talking about, Agrana. Please tell me who this whore you speak of is, and I will do my best to find her." "You know damn well who I am talking about. The dirty little slut that seems to think your grandson is hers." Agrana pushed past Elon and into the hall where Will and Alicia Saturday. Gotrow appeared to have teleported to Agrana and had her by the throat, holding her off the ground with one hand as his voice came out in a low growl. "You forget yourself, Ogdashi. You come into my home and cause a scene and shove aside my wife. You would do well to remember who we are and why we are in power." Agrana's eyes darted from Gotrow to Elon before she managed to squeak out an apology. Elon placed a hand on her protective husband's shoulder. "Gotrow, I think she understands. Why don't you put her down before she passes out?" Gotrow's entire demeanor changed to a smile that radiated love for Elon. "Of course, my love." After taking a moment, Agrana spoke more calmly. "Once again I apologize, Gotrow, Elon, rulers of the Gobran. I did not mean to insult you or your home. But I do have business with the who." She caught the raised eyebrow Elon directed at her before continuing her sentence. "With the Princess of Colt." "You have business with me?" Alicia asked. Out of the corner of her eye. She saw the handmaid who saw her with Will bowing in apology with a look of utter fear on her face. Yes, Agrana said, in front of Ilika, Will had a weary eye on her and hoped she would not be foolish enough to strike the princess. Alicia Terrace Koltschelg, Princess of Colt, I Agrana Nar Grosh challenge you to Uarna Jin. The room was silent for a moment before Will spoke. Agrana, you need to stop now and apologize. Alicia was confused, she did not know what Uarna Jin was, but from the looks on Will's face, it was nothing good. Agrana smiled viciously. Why should I do such a thing? You were promised to me first, as such I have the right. Alicia looked at Will and saw rage course through his eyes. His tone could have frozen magma as he spoke. I was never promised to you. You made it clear that with my, and I quote, stupid human father out of the way you thought my grandparents would give me to you as some kind of reward for good service. Not once did you ask what I wanted, and not once did you show sympathy for my father. On top of that, as per the laws of the Gobran, I could not be forced to marry you no matter what Orcish customs or any other customs had already taken place. Ilcia was stunned. She had never heard Will speak this way. He was hurt and doing his best to cover the pain in his voice with anger. It made her sad when she realized that Agrana could not understand this, or hear the pain in Will's tone. Alicia was stunned as Agrana laughed. Of course I am glad your father is gone. The only good thing he ever did was produce you, and remove that bitch Yilner from the picture. Agrana said. Her eyes widened as she realized what she had said. Elan and Gotro looked deeply hurt and Elan seemed to be whispering calming words in Gotro's ear. His face was red and he was near tears. Alicia spoke, hoping to draw attention away from what Agrana said. Can someone please tell me what Uarna Jin is? Will spoke in a monotone voice, clearly keeping a Herculean grip on his emotions. Uarna Jin is right of the promised. In Orcish culture, a man can have many potential mates. If he does not wish to take them all, the women promised to him may take it upon themselves to sort out who will be his wife. This usually takes the form of ritual combat, often to the death. Exactly, Agrana said aggressively, ignoring that she insulted almost everyone in the room. As one who seems to have a claim on Will, you are subject to Uarna Jin. Before anyone else could speak, a wicked look crossed Gotro's eyes. Are you sure you want to do this, Agrana? Absolutely sure? Agrana seemed to hesitate but finally nodded. I am sure. Very well, Gotro said, an evil smile growing on his face. As you addressed her with her titles, I assume you understand she has certain rights. Not only under the laws of her kingdom, but also under the laws of the Gobran, as she is the diplomatic entourage here on the behalf of the King of Colt. Agrana's face paled somewhat. Yes. And as such, she is permitted in all rituals and customs that require combat to elect a champion, someone who may stand in for her in combat. Gotro said, I. Agrana said, realizing her mistake. Gotro cut her off, and as Princess of Colt, she may make that request of any in the Gobran, and not just Will. Will is the male in the Uarna Jin and is also assigned to the princess as the Prinex's man, which includes being her bodyguard. Gotro said, turning to Alicia. Princess Alicia of the Kingdom of Colt, I Gotro of the Gobran, first Ogren of the Ogdashi, protector of the Joknaare clan, and mate to the last of the Valdesh family of Gilsharibram, offer to stand in as your champion in place of your man as he is subject to the Uarna Jin. Alicia was frozen. She knew this was Gotro's way of getting back at Agrana for what she said, but she did not want anyone to fight. This was not supposed to happen like this. She was panicking and was about to burst and say something she might regret when Will spoke. Before we go so far as to start killing each other, why don't you tell us what made you come here all in a huff, Agrana? Will asked, still using the monotone voice that Ilika guessed helped him suppress whatever rage he was feeling. I heard this woman was seen doing things. with Will. Agrana said, seeming to be disgusted at the idea that Will and Alicia would be intimate. The handmaid stepped forward and bowed deeply as she spoke to Alicia. "I apologize, miss, I had just left and was in the bath. I hate to admit it, but I was gossiping about what had happened, because, well, all of the ladies' maids and many of the members of Gobran think you and Will are a great couple. But anyway, I was talking about what I saw and Agrana overheard, and that led us to here and now." She bowed deeply and Alicia smiled at the Drayty woman. "It's fine, though I do wish you would not gossip about me." Agrana was nodding. "Exactly. I heard what was going on and decided I could not let anyone else have you, especially since we were promised to each other." Agrana, Elan said with a slightly disdainful look. "Where did you get this idea of being promised to each Will?" "Before Will left and came back with her," Agrana said, gesturing at Alicia, "you and I spoke and you agreed to a promise." "I think you misunderstood me," Elan said. "If I promised you anything I would remember. What I think I said was that if Will and his father were amicable about it, there could be a promise. I think I did say I would arrange the meeting with his father for you." Agrana seemed to shrink at Elan's recounting of what was said. "Well, I still have a claim to you, Arna Jin," Agrana said dejectedly. Will stepped forward and looked into Agrana's eyes. Agrana looked as if she was hopeful he would agree with her and claim her as his. Instead, the words that Will spoke next crushed her as surely as if a boulder had fallen from a great height. "Agrana, let me make this as clear as I possibly can," Will said and took a breath. "I want to thank you for teaching me everything you did, from combat to love, to sex. You taught me much. But I could never love someone who hated my mother and father. You and I were never promised and never will be. I will never pick you over Alicia." Alicia could not help but feel sad for Agrana, who looked nothing like the strong and powerful woman she was. She looked more akin to a scared child. Agrana looked around the room hoping to find a bastion of support somewhere and found none. She fled, running from the room and out into the streets. The rest of the morning was relaxed, at least for Alicia. Elan and Gotro retreated to their private chambers and Will asked Alicia if he could go train for an hour or so to get his mind off of everything. Alicia smiled and nodded, giving him a loving kiss before he left. After being alone for a while, Alicia and her handmaid decided to go to the baths. With everyone getting ready for the celebrations this evening, the baths were surprisingly deserted. As she scrubbed her hair with a lovely foaming soap the Drayty produced, she heard a strange sound and called out to her handmaid. "Are you all right?" When she got nothing back in response, Alicia quickly dunked her head under water to clear the soap from her eyes and opened them to find herself face to face with a furious Agrana. The look on her face scared Alicia and she opened her mouth to call for help, but she was slammed under the water with a quick toss from Agrana. Alicia quickly swam to the surface and came up to find Agrana in the water next to her. Agrana grabbed her shoulders and pinned her to the wall, separating the men's and women's sides of the bath. Over Agrana's shoulder, she could see her handmaid laying on the side of the bathing pool unconscious or dead. Alicia saw the anger on Agrana's face. She closed her eyes wishing Will a good life, as she felt one of Agrana's hands draw back to deliver a blow. The princess's manned 15, Alicia felt Agrana draw her hand back to deliver a blow which would surely end the fight before it began when a voice rang out. "I don't know if this is the move you want to make, Agrana." An elderly and familiar voice said. Alicia opened her eyes when the blow did not come and saw Carva standing beside Agrana with a disapproving look in her eyes. Agrana looked as if she was desperately looking for a way to justify the blow. "If this is the move you want to make, then by all means, please go ahead, Agrana," Carva said, "but remember, if you do this, I must report all you have done here to Gotro, Elan, and Will. And before you even suggest it, we both know there is nothing you could do to stop me." Alicia heard Agrana's jaw click shut. Then she felt Agrana release her and Agrana stormed out of the bathing area. Alicia nearly collapsed in the water, and then suddenly felt strong hands supporting her. Carva was next to her and guided her to a seat near her handmaid, who was stirring. What did I do? Alicia asked numbly. She thought she had a pretty good idea of what she had done, but she did not understand why it had gone this far. You did nothing, child, it is Agrana who is in the wrong. And even then, it's not truly Agrana's fault. Carva said, and then took a deep breath, sinking into the warm water up to her shoulders. If you want to blame anything, blame Orcish culture and heritage. Something like this would not only be normal in a standard Orc clan, but encouraged. Trying to kill each other over a broken heart is normal? Alicia asked in disbelief. Oh yes, but again it is not the fault of the individuals. There was a time when the Orcs roamed the wastelands to the southwest. It is where they are said to have originated from. In those wastelands, having the most powerful mate could be the difference between barely surviving and having all your children grow up strong. So for generations, the women of the Orcish clans killed one another over the strongest males. Alicia looked at Carva in disbelief. Carva continued speaking. However, if I may make a suggestion. You are not willing to share, well, with another woman, I presume? No. Alicia said, surprising herself with the anger she brought forth with the thought. Carva laughed. I thought not. And this is appropriate for one in your position. A princess should not share a mate unless it is with another princess. So instead of having to watch your back for Agrana your entire life, or instead of having Will kill her, as I am certain he will after he hears about this, make her your ally. Make her loyal not to Will, but to you. Make Agrana loyal to protecting you and maybe even one day your children. Alicia was stunned. The thought was alien to her. In her father's kingdom, such actions as Agrana had taken would result in death. But maybe Carva was right. Carva smiled at the young woman whose brow had wrinkled in thought. She stood to leave and felt Alicia grab her wrist. Alicia spoke. Thank you, Carva, I appreciate everything you did today. Can I ask what it is you do here in the Gobran? Carva smiled. I am Carva Battleborn, first among the Ogdashi, and leader of the Shadow Guard. You could say I am the strongest fighter in the Gobran, other than the leader's family. Alicia was shocked and thought to ask more questions. But by the time her mouth caught up with her head, Carva was gone. She sat on the shallow stairs with her handmaid as she waited for the Drati woman to regain consciousness. When she came to, Alicia helped her to her feet and they both made their way back to the rooms she had shared with Will earlier in the day. The other maids saw Alicia supporting her handmaid and rushed to help. As per their conversation on the way back, the handmaid said she had simply stayed in the heat of the water for too long. Alicia dressed in a simple tunic and trousers and went to find Elan. Alicia found Elan sitting in her private library. Elan smiled and looked up when she saw Alicia. Sweet child, you look as if you have a great deal on your mind. I do, Alicia said and then looked Elan in the eyes. Elan, I need to tell you what happened, but I would appreciate it if it stayed between you and I. Not even Gotro or Will can hear of it, or someone will die. Elan got a serious look on her face and nodded, waving her hand. Alicia felt a cold wave of magic wash over her and assumed she was free to talk. Alicia told Elan what had happened, every detail of her conversation with Carva, and what she had suggested Alicia do. Elan let her finish then laughed, humorlessly. Well, I guess it makes sense for Carva to suggest that particular path. After all, it is the path I consigned her to several hundred years ago. Alicia's eyebrows shot to the top of her forehead. I'm sorry, what? Elan smiled at Alicia. Alicia, I am near to 1,000 years old, Gotro and Carva are both close to 600 years old. I mean that makes sense for you, and for Carva, but orcs are lucky if they live to 300. They are the shortest-lived race other than humans. Correct. To satisfy your curiosity about his age, suffice it to say, he and I are bonded in ways no others have ever been. It is a result of the magic which allowed our daughter to be born. As such, if I live, so shall he. If I die, so shall he. Elon let Alicia process for a moment and then continued speaking. When I first met Gottro, he was only a young man of 100, but already he had amassed a strong clan, and had laid plans to lead his clan and any who would follow him from the wastelands to a better home. He lacked only one thing: magic. Alicia settled in to listen to a story she felt not many knew. Elon continued. One day, he rescued me from a tar pit I had slipped and fallen into. In exchange, I offered the magic he needed to pull off his plan. For the next 2 years, I wandered with the assemblage of clans he had led from the wastelands. Finally, we settled here. And almost instantly the women of the clans began vying for Gottro's attention. And it shocked me at how much it hurt to watch him get pulled into a tent by an eager young woman. What was even more shocking was how relieved I was when he would appear moments later begging his leave, before taking off away from said tent. After I watched the third woman try this, I knew he was waiting for someone, and hoped against all hope it was me. Elon smiled at the giddy look on Alicia's face as she paused for a breath. So the next day, I went to his tent, and waited, naked and with bated breath, hoping he would not send me away. When the tent flap opened, I expected Gottro, but the one who I threw my arms around was Karva. She flipped me onto my back and I blasted her, and the tent, 60 feet into the air, to land at the feet of Gottro. Gottro took one look at my naked form with a dislocated shoulder, and Karva's naked form tangled in the tent and growled in disgust. I will not be fought over like some prize buck. If you want to win my hand, win my heart, was all Gottro said before disappearing into the dark. You are far more bold than I, Alicia said with a smile. What happened next? I helped Karva to her feet and we treated each other's injuries, and I made her a deal. We would both attempt to win his heart, and in the end, whoever lost would serve the other until death. For several years, it looked as if I would end up serving Karva until she died, but in the end, Gottro asked for my hand on the night he was named ruler of the Gobran collective. After our first night together, Karva came to me and pledged her loyalty, and formed the Shadow Guard. Both of us thought there would be spite and anger, and for the first decade there was, but afterward, it was as if being angry was too taxing. And when my daughter was born, well, suffice it to say, had anyone ever tried to harm my family, Karva would have done horrible things to any who tried. Karva loved my daughter as if she were her own, and that was all I could ever ask for. Elon spoke the rest in a way that told Alicia she was getting a deeply abridged variation of what had happened. So then how can I do that with a grana? Alicia asked. I don't know if you can. Elon sighed. A grana, for all her skill and ability, is about as stubborn as I have ever seen someone be. If you can think of a way, then I would try. Who knows, you and a grana may end up the best of friends as Karva and I are. Or things may come to a point where a grana needs to be killed, in which case, just tell Will and it will be done. Alright, Alicia said, surprised at how easily the idea of Will killing for her just because she said so flowed through her. Thank you for the advice, Elon, and thank you for the story. I am grateful to know more about you and Gottro. Not a problem. Now go and rest, child. You start your training again tomorrow, so enjoy the day off, Elon said, waving her hand to dismiss the magic which had been protecting their conversation. Alicia stood and went to find Will. She found him lying in the sand sunning himself at a nearby river. There were several other people, mostly women, who were sunbathing as well. Alicia sat down next to Will and felt the sand between her toes. When I was younger, not many knew of this place, but I can only guess I got followed here a couple of times, and now the news has spread. Will said without opening his eyes, "It is a lovely little beach." Alicia said, and casually reached forward to touzle Will's hair. "Well, I am going to do something I think you might not be a fan of. I just want to know if you would still support me even if you disagree with me?" Will opened his eyes and shaded them from the sun with one massive hand. "I don't know what it is you are going to do, but yes, I think I would. I don't honestly know, and can't until it happens." "That's fair," Alicia said and then stood. "All right, well, come back soon so we can have an early dinner." "Yes, princess," Will said, laying back and closing his eyes once more. Alicia walked back towards the center of the collective. She was about to pass through the gates, which would take her to the main street, when a hand darted out of the undergrowth and pulled her into the bushes. Alicia found herself in a small clearing ringed by high bushes and trees. Pinning her to one of the trees was Agrana. Agrana's hand covered Alicia's mouth, and she spoke quickly. "I am not going to hurt you, but I need you to just listen, okay?" Agrana pulled her hand back and Alicia spoke. "As long as you listen to me after you are done." Agrana nodded, and Alicia took a seat on a tuft of grass, gesturing for Agrana to sit next to her. Agrana did, grudgingly, and began to speak. "Princess Alicia, Alicia, please just call me Alicia. After being nearly killed by you and threatened, I feel as if we can forego the pomp." Alicia said, getting a small flinch from Agrana. "Very well, Alicia, I wanted to first apologize to you for my behavior in the baths. I realize what is normal for me, and my people, is not even recognized as acceptable in the world you live in." Agrana looked down at the dirt. "I also want to explain why I have been so adamant about making Will mine." Agrana looked up and surprised Alicia, as she had a look of ultimate vulnerability on her face. "Will is nice, and I don't mean nice as in polite, I mean he was the first person I was romantically involved with who treated me as just another partner. He was not concerned with how strong I was, he was not worried if I was stronger than him or made him look bad. He only wanted my body, he needed me to please him, and we shared a closeness and sensuality that we both needed." Agrana took a breath. "I know in human cultures, a man only wanting you for your body is not wanted, well, at least most of the time, but in Orc culture, where so much revolves around strength and combatability, it is incredibly rare to find a partner who wants you just for you, even just your body, rather than how many victories you could bring to the clan, or how strong the males of your line are. He just wanted me." Alicia was surprised. Agrana's tone was as harsh as ever, but there was a look in her eyes Alicia knew to be the soft woman who just wanted to be loved. Alicia waited for more, but Agrana sat there, every inch the warrior on the outside, and a scared lonely maiden on the inside. "Thank you for telling me those things." Alicia said, "You are welcome. I also wanted to tell you, you don't have to worry, I leave tomorrow to travel to the ancestral home of the Orcs. And find what fate has in store for me." Agrana sounded angry at this, then took a breath. "But after how insulted you, Will, Gotro, and Lady Elan. Well, what else can I do?" "I have a suggestion," Alicia said, smiling at the chance she had now. Agrana looked at her in surprise and waited. Ilcia spoke. "Instead of leaving, become a member of my personal guard, come and train Sir Balfour and the other knights. In this way, you can still be a part of Will's life. It'll allow you to find a mate as well, because if there is something I have realized, it is Will seems to attract great and strange people to him." Agrana was flabbergasted. "You would want me as a guard even after I tried to kill you?" "I would. How better to know a warrior's capabilities, than to have them attempt to kill you?" Alicia said with a smile, "If you are sure, then I would be honored, though I must first be relinquished from my post within the Gobran. If it can be arranged, I will take you up on this offer." Agrana said, sounding like a strange mix of thankful and awkward. Well then, let's go talk to Ilan and see what we can work out. Alicia said, turning her back to Agrana, and for an instant, she wondered if she had made a mistake. Alicia held her breath until she heard Agran speak again. Yes, princess.